Backstage with Mothership on Solid Rock Radio begins now. Hear the best in new music, artist interviews, stories from the road, and more. You are now backstage, and here's your host, Mothership.
Hey everybody, my guest tonight is Tommy Green from the Project Holy Name. Now some of you will remember him as the lead vocalist of the band Sleeping Giant, and others might know him because of his advocating for the vulnerable in sex trafficking through his ministry called Run Against Traffic. Let's jump into the interview. I have Tommy Green, a founding member of Sleeping Giant. Wait, did any other founding members stay till the end?
My old friend named Travis, who was the drummer, and a dude named Corey were the first two members, and then I was the only guy that stayed through the whole thing. But yeah, there was three of us at the beginning.
All right. Well, you need to give us a little TLDR on the origin story of that band before we move on to other and more recent events.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being on.
Yeah, really cool. It's kind of like a blast from the past. I was pastoring a church. I'd gotten saved and serious, and I just felt really convicted to try to share Christ with the community that I was from in Southern California. And so I'd started kind of like a Bible study in a living room that turned into like a church, a small church group, and that was called Tithamy, and that was in 2004. And so it started there, and then we moved into a little strip mall, and we were hosting shows and putting on punk rock and hardcore shows and crush shows and metal shows. And we were doing shows in the park or loading docks and getting shut down and like kicked out and like all sorts of stuff. And so we just tried to serve the scene. And that was also where we were given the chance to hold our church services there. And then we were able to do shows there. And so that was where we were. And I was in a band prior to that called Death Star, but I was a single dad at that point and was pastoring. And I just knew I didn't have the capacity to do that. And so we did our first tour out to a big festival called Hellfest that was in New Jersey in 2004. And on the way back from that trip, it was such a big ordeal for me personally that I was like, I think I got to leave. I don't think I can do this. And so I really committed myself to being at Tithamy and booking shows. And I got to play drums in a band called Plague the Red Letters with some homies. But we just put on shows, and that's what I was doing. And then my friend Travis and my old friend Corey said, we want to start a band and we'd love for you to sing. And I said, well, all I'm going to do is talk about Jesus because it's all I care about. And they were like, that's fine. That's what we figured you would say. That's great. So they started a band, and we did our practices at the church, and Death Star was practicing at the church a little bit. And that was just kind of like our home base. We got the name. One of my favorite bands when I was in high school was a hardcore band from New Jersey called Dead Guy. And they had a song called Crazy Eddie. And in that song, they talk about the sleeping giant who is learning to crawl. And it's just this it's an awesome song. The notes are incredible. It was just one of my favorite songs when I was like maybe 15, 16 years old. And so we were trying to come up with names, and I just thought, what about Sleeping Giant? And they were like, that's pretty awesome. And so that was kind of the initial thought. And then within a year, we found out, or we started getting told, did you know that the region that you guys are from, the Inland Empire of Southern California is the region? It was called the Sleeping Giant because it actually fueled a bunch of industry into Los Angeles. And so it represented kind of where we were, which was awesome because we had a lot of pride in just representing our city and our community and where we were at that point. So it turned into something bigger, but really it just started because Dead Guy is an incredible band, and Sleeping Giant just seemed like a cool name. So yes, that's where the band sort of started. It was birthed out of kind of our church community and kind of what we had going on, just Christian hardcore kids in the scene down there.
Now, what year was that?
We started at the end of 2005, and then a handful of months later, we played our first show. Sleeping Giant's first show was my bachelor party show before I married Chrissy Green. And so I know how long I was in the band because I knew how long I'd been married to my wife. So our first show was with Death Star. It was like 2 or 3 bands or whatever, but it was just a bachelor party show for me the night before I got married. So that would have been February 17th, 2006. When we played our final show, we ended where we started. So our final show was February 17th, 2018. So it was 12 years to the date.
Wow.
Which I felt in my heart at that point, like that would be a really cool way to come full circle, to finish where we began. And I like that number, and just being kind of a Christian weirdo. I was like, yeah, man, 12 years. That's a good thing. Let's do that, you know? And I thought at one point we were like 7 years in, and I thought that was going to be the end point. but it wasn't the right time. And some of the dudes ended up stepping away, and it was a big deal, but I really didn't feel like we were done yet. Mm-hmm. So it ended up going a bit longer. I'm grateful for it.
5 albums, 12 years. Was it hard to call it quits?
No. When we went through that change as a band where 2 of the biggest, like, super important friends of mine, that they just stepped away. They just were at a point where they were done. And I think there was just a lot changing kind of in life at that point and stuff. And I was talking with a mentor. He said, Tommy, no one ever has a vision for the end. Everyone always has a vision for the beginning, but no one ever has a vision for the end. And I just remember thinking, well, if I'm going to move forward, I need to get a vision for how this is going to end so that we can finish well. Yeah, as we were coming into kind of like the final sort of chapter of where we were, I thought, well, let's finish back at the label that we started on. Let's do some final shows. And then we were going to do like a farewell video, and it turned into kind of like a small documentary about the band. And so we just wanted to like end well. At that point, though, because of how serious I took what we had gone through, all the relationships, where I was in life, I was done. I was like really done. And I felt like I was hoping that we at least had sort of done some of the things that we'd set out to do, and maintaining some credibility, especially with people that don't believe in Christ, and kind of just ending in a good way. Yeah. So I think I was done, man. I was done.
So you finished with your farewell album, I Am, in 2018. Yes. And then what?
Well, to be honest with you, what happened was we did our final show in 2018. And we'll talk probably a little bit more about it towards the end, is my wife and I had gone through a pretty traumatic and powerful experience in meeting some people that were actually exposed and vulnerable and actually became victims of human trafficking. And so I was in the process of preparing for a really significant event to try to kick off our nonprofit work in the human trafficking space. I had basically decided that October of 2018, I was going to physically run from the top of Utah to the bottom of Utah to start our organization, Run Against Traffic. And so we finished the band in February of 2018. I'm in kind of training for this big thing that's going to happen at the end of the year. And 2018 was like the start of like some really intense moments. My little brother, Connor, passed away suddenly in May of 2018. And then Chrissy and me had the first of what would become 4 miscarriages over the next like year and a half. Her mother passed away. My uncle passed away. A nephew of ours passed away really dramatically. And 2018, I thought we were gearing up for this, like just this big run. And then when we closed out the band, part of why I'm glad that the band stayed around as long as it did was the last weekend that I had with like all of my family was the farewell date. And my brother was living in Boston at the time. My little brother Ryan was in Salt Lake with his fiance. My family from Utah, Boston, California, Washington, Seattle, everyone came down. And it was really actually like the final weekend that all of my family was together, and Connor was alive. And a couple months later, he was gone. And so if that's the only reason that we kept the band going until 2012 to just have that moment, it's worth it for me. So 2018 was wild in that way. Just I didn't expect to be sort of hit from so many directions from 2018 through 2019. So yeah, I was grateful that we closed up shop on SG. And then as I was moving into this kind of new dimension, I really felt as though I was really confronted with the power of what death is, and then fought kind of our way through that.
That's a lot of grief for a short period of time. I am so sorry for your losses.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me sharing, I'm really feeling you right now. I've had miscarriages myself, and in the last few years, we've had a lot of traumatic loss in a short period of time. We've had a family suicide, murder of my brother, the loss of both of my parents 1 year apart. It's a lot.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Everything changes when you lose people like that.
I think that's part of what I've done in the last year. One of the things that I did creatively with one of our friends from the Rev community, which is kind of like the church or ministry community that me and Chrissy Green have been leading since 2009, is my friend Joe Holt, who's a kid from Minnesota. We started a project for worship in our community called Holy Name.
Backstage with Mothership returns after this. Outperformance Shop is a proud supporter of Solid Rock Radio. They specialize in retail and wholesale of automotive, high-performance, racing, and off-road products. They also carry a variety of accessories from remote control cars to rock and roller multi-carts. On the web at outperformance.com. Check us out on Facebook at time with Mothership.
We have a bunch of really amazing worshipers in our kind of tribe. And when COVID hit, I remember thinking, well, let's just make like a COVID mixtape. And wherever you are, send us a song that's in your heart. And then we'll just put it together. We'll put it out. And this will be kind of a mile marker of where we all were. And initially, we just covered my brother-in-law. His name's Aaron Craner, and he's one of my favorite worship leaders like on the planet. And he had written a song called Fall on Your Knees. And so I just called Joe and said, Joe, can we cover one of Aaron's songs? Will you make it heavy? And he was like, yeah. And so then I sent him one of my worship songs, which was called Meet Me Somewhere Quiet. And I sent him that one, and then we sent Aaron's, and I was like, mine are not good. I only play like 2 notes on the guitar. I don't know how to play that well. But I sent it to him, and I was like, let's make these like heavy. And he was like, dude, that's awesome. That'll be part of like the thing. And so Holy Name started around Easter a year ago. And it was really, for me at least, in the wake of what you've shared, I felt like I was reaching into songs I wrote years ago when I felt it. And I was trying to like re-sing them to try to keep my faith alive and kind of keep my heart up. I felt brokenhearted by a whole lot of the things that I believed and the people that I believed in. And I also felt brokenhearted by the journey of discipleship and learning and growing in grief and in the seeming silence of God, and being such a sharer and such a preacher and trying to be someone that brings a lot of encouragement to people. I was deeply sad. I was struggling. And so anyway, so I wrote these songs and just sort of threw them back in front of me, like, remember when I used to feel these ways. And in some ways I was just trying to like keep myself going. And by the grace of God, like, it turned into a whole new project. And then because Joe and I worked so well together, he's like a little genius of a person and he does everything. I'm just like the guy from the band, but he's the dude. And so, you know, just sharing other worship songs that I'd written, and then he would just add stuff. And so it turned into a really significant new chapter. I think it's a really, really cool project. Holy Name got picked up by Face Down. We put a couple songs out just by ourselves, and it sort of got a little bit of buzz, which was interesting. And then JD hit me up and said, "Do you have more music?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he's like, dude, like, let's do something. And so it felt cool to kind of be on Face Down. And so we have a full-length record that we've been writing and recording, and that's supposed to come out here shortly. The big delay has been, it's really challenging for people to get vinyl for records. It's been hard for us to put out a release date. I wanted to do it on Easter, so it'd be like 1 year from where we first started to like we put it out. Hopefully that will come out before the end of the year. It's been really, really exciting, really cool songs, a lot of guest vocals, and like just a cool project. So Holy Name has sort of come out of that season of pain and grief. So I really didn't have a plan to do music when we shut down SG. 2018 into 2019 was just like absolutely brutal. Chrissy Green and me would say like we were army crawling our way out of 2019. Like, yeah, 2020 is going to be our year. And then the whole world went into lockdown. And it was just like, holy smokes, like what is happening? We had one more miscarriage in 2020, but we felt like we were trying to turn the corner on what we had gone through in 2018 and 2019, but we really lost a lot of steam. And, you know, 5 years from now, I'll look back and think about it differently, but that was a brutal time. So Holy Name kind of came out of that season, but that wasn't the plan.
Seems like you ended up ministering to yourself.
Yeah, I kind of needed to. I was working at a Bible college and as an evangelistic mentor for these third-year students, and the director of the Bible college he had serious psychological issues, and he was grooming women on his staff. And so the whole university got shut down. And this was all running during 2018. So I did my run and then went back to actually be there for the formal closing of the school. While that stuff is going down in the church world, I'm watching people that I thought were heroes responding to sexual abuse and grooming and predatory behavior from leaders. And in this case, I watched a lot of people, including mighty men of God. I watched them protect the man at the platform at the expense of the victims. Women. I think all of that bled into this feeling of like, I literally don't know where I am anymore. And that was going on. But I just remember thinking, what are we protecting again? Why are you guys working so hard to protect the image, this institution or the church, or, you know, you're trying so hard to be like graceful and forgiving, but you've positioned yourself completely opposite of those most vulnerable. And I felt like I don't understand this world at all. And I'm a mercy kid. Like, I'm a second chance kid. I've needed to be forgiven 1,000 times. If I'd have gotten caught much younger, I'd have gone to jail or been, you know, dead. And it's like, by the grace of God, I'm alive. Now here I am 20 years later watching how the church responds and just going, what are you guys trying to protect, man? Like, this is crazy. I don't want any part of this. This does not represent my heart culture at all. And you guys were like my heroes. To watch how these people responded, I just thought, oh, this is a complete failure. And, a couple people are going to have some like BS testimony about how God restored them, but they've never dealt with the problem. And it's just going to reappear again and again and again because we don't know exactly what to do. And so that was happening. And in the midst of all this pain and loss and everything, and I just remember thinking, like, I can't do this. So, yeah, that was a wild time. I don't talk about that a whole lot, but it was crazy to watch that go down. You go through all that. It really changes a lot. It was like the Apostle Paul saying almost like it was beyond our ability to endure. I don't know what to do. And so that's part of the struggle with death itself, being reframed in my understanding, being saved out of like maybe a version of Christianity that nurtured me to a point, but is failing. And also the unbelievable rage I have at injustice, both inside and outside of the church. That's kind of where I've been in this project. And that's, I think, hopefully where Holy Name I can try to praise in the midst of it. But the nice way to say it is just like I've become disgusted by a whole lot of things. And I'm trying like as hard as I can to really find the eyes of Christ in the midst of all this chaos. And it's been extraordinarily difficult. But I'm in, but I'm like, I just feel like, holy smokes.
What are we doing? I'm with you, man.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah.
Let's talk a little more about Holy Name, and then we'll talk about Run Against Traffic. Yeah. How would you describe the genre of your new music?
I didn't want to yell. I wanted to sing, and these were worship songs, and so, but I just remember thinking like...
So different.
I just wanted it to be really heavy, but I'm trying to find melody. Joe would say, we just want to like worship, and then we want to kick walls. Like we just want to go off. And I mean, some of the stuff that he's written on this record, I'm like, whoa, like stuff that hasn't been released yet. I'm just like, geez, this is great. And it was almost challenging for me to try to find the song, because ordinarily it would just be, let's yell over the whole thing. And so I don't know, man. I don't know.
It has something for everybody.
Yeah, I hope so.
Very unique. I challenge people who haven't listened to listen, because a lot of my friends are going to love it if they haven't heard it yet.
Well, I hope so. Please check it out.
I noticed you for the first time when you won a Grizzly Award for Braveheart Song of the Year for Meet Me Somewhere Quiet.
Yeah. Thank you that voted, man. That was crazy. I've never won an award before. That's wild. I was like, okay, thanks, man. Like, this is crazy. Like, okay. So it was awesome. Again, the origin of that song, it was me and a guitar 7 years ago in my living room, and that's devotional music for me by myself. And I thought for sure it was just going to be, just a song I played by myself. And then when we started doing this, like the Rev, like mixtape, I thought, I'll put one of my songs out there. But I thought, you know what? I bet you the dudes would like it if I had more participation. So let's make it heavy. Let's see what Joe would do with it. And he's so awesome, so brilliant, that he was like, yeah, man, let me figure it out. And then he like helped put it together, and he sang a version of it, and I was like, yo, like you just elevated this whole thing. This is awesome. And so then I sent him more of the worship songs we did, and that's kind of where he went. So with Meet Me Somewhere Quiet, it was literally just like about the secret life, about that place of just feeling connected and an intimate union with Jesus it's personal.
Will Holy Name tour?
I don't know. We've been talking a bit about, what would it really look like? Yeah, I would like to get out there maybe, but it'd have to be the right thing, and it would have to be the right kind of setup, because I'd really want it to be an experience that would be special for people. And for me, I think we could do it. It'd take a bit. I guess we'll kind of see how people respond, and if they're down, it'd be awesome.
Maybe some festivals.
Yeah, some stuff like that would be really cool. We'll see. Me and Joe are both dads. Like, we have a bunch of kids, and we have these incredible women in our life that are like our partners, and they're just the most incredible people. And so we're not in the space that we were when we were much younger, but I think it would be really cool if we could put stuff together. I think it would be a really powerful experience for people, kind of going back and forth and trying to figure out if there's a way to do this well, because I think these songs are great. I really like this project. I really, really like it. I feel really connected to it, and I'm proud of it. So I want to do that justice,
Yeah.
So
I know some people would really love to hear that kind of worship live.
I hope so. When I think of it, I think of all the people in my life, like kind of our gang of friends out here. And I'm like, I think that they would go off and it would be a wild time. And I think people would be able to connect with Christ. And I think kids that don't know what's happening would either get into the notes and the melody, or they would just get into how heavy it is. Like, I think it creates space for people, but feel like let's just do ruckus and chaos and let's just see what happens. So
we'll just have to pay close attention, won't we?
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. We'll see.
Speaking of the road, what are your favorite road snacks, if you can remember?
What were some of my favorite things? Dude, I feel out of practice. I really liked peanut M&Ms and gummy worms. The last few tours, I remember, what did we do? Naked juice and coconut water. I remember thinking that was pretty good. I can't remember. Like, God, that's a while ago. Yeah, that's crazy.
I just had to ask because that's part of my ritual.
Yeah, I love it. That's cool.
Backstage with Mothership returns after this. Outperformance Service Family is a Solid Rock Radio business ministry partner who offers turnkey e-commerce website design, marketing, and converged technology consulting. Online at outperformancemarketing.com.
Now let's talk about the ministry you founded and how that came about.
Yeah, so I had a YouTube channel when I was in Sleeping Giant. I was just trying to bring, little sermons and stuff. I was trying to keep people sort of interested in what we were doing and being present when we weren't touring. And then I got contacted by a kid from Europe, and I thought it was a joke. And she's like a 15-year-old girl, and I didn't want to talk to a girl on the internet that I didn't know. And so I had my assistant and my wife was there, and I was like, can you find out if this is actually a real girl and what's going on? Because it sounded like a really bad situation in her home. That turned into she was being abused, and so we found an organization in her region that seemed like they would take in kids at risk. And then she sent us a Google message a couple of days later that was like, Chrissy, please pray for me. They're coming. And you could hear people pounding on the door and all this crazy stuff popping off. And then we were contacted by that organization, a day or so later. And they were like, hey, she said she was in conversations with this American couple. Can you help us by being kind of her de facto safe person to talk to? Because she doesn't really want to talk with us. And so that sort of started this wild journey where we watched a kid go from affluence and a seemingly connected home life to a broken home because of a breakdown in her family. Bad stuff starts happening, and then maybe a new influence or two shows up in the home, and then maybe there's some abuse and some drug stuff happening, and then all of a sudden she's out of there and she's at this organization. And unfortunately, a member of her family showed up to the organization over the Christmas holiday with some men pretending to be lawyers, and they kidnapped her out. And she was found a few days later at a brothel in France with 14 other girls, which was wild. So all of a sudden it went from just trying to help a kid that sounded like her home was kind of breaking apart and kind of normal dysfunction. Oh man, that sucks really bad. Oh my gosh, it was worse than what we thought. That sucks too. Oh man. And then all of a sudden it's what happened? And then, oh my God, she was trafficked. And that was insane. And that was our first introduction into this experience. And, I knew it was an issue, wrote about it on records, wanted to advocate for people, but had never been sort of touched by it. And it was just a brutal story. I mean, it did not have a happy ending at all. Unfortunately, because of the extent of the abuse that she went through, both in the organization that was supposed to be taking care of her and out on the street, she got really, really sick and passed away. And so within, I think it was maybe a year, 9 to 12 months after we lost her, we got an email from one of the other girls from that brothel. And she said, man, I was given your email by this young girl. She said if I was ever in trouble that I could call her mom. And that was Chrissy. And she began to describe what was going on in those few days while they were there. And she said, I didn't believe in God, but this girl was all the time telling me Bible stories. And she would go room by room and pray for the other girls that were there. And so we heard kind of the other story of what was happening and how there was this almost indestructible faith happening in this young girl. And then the second survivor that just knew she needed help. And it was because she was still kind of addicted. She would go back and forth in the cycle. And she was pregnant with twins. And so in the aftercare process, trying to get her out of that situation and clean, and she was in a rehab, and then she faltered and went back to the streets. And so for us, what we saw was you can get people out of these circumstances, but if they don't have the right kind of care, they're going back. And in America, especially where there's a lot of red tape and it's very difficult to do, they don't want people to be abused or neglected, and they won't just let anyone start like an orphanage. You can't just start that. And so it's a challenging thing here in our country to create a safe place for people and make sure that it's done well and that it's not going to be a money grab or abusive to people. And so the problem that we fell in love with was you could have all the right doctors in place and all the security and not enough money. Or you could have all the money in the world and not the right people. And if you don't hit at the right time, they won't sign off on it. And so aftercare is a very complex thing. It takes a long time. It's very expensive, and it's a long game. And so we wanted to create almost like what Lance Armstrong created for cancer research. We just wanted to create a foundation or a system that would generate revenue for aftercare. We wanted to do for aftercare what was being done with breast cancer research and all these other things through running and cycling and community involvement. Like, we wanted to create a war chest of resource and money and all this stuff, because it's going to take a long time to solve this problem. And so if you kicked in all the doors and recovered all these precious people, there's nowhere for them to go. And so 99% of them are probably going to end up back. And so anyway, so we wanted to solve the problem of long-term aftercare in the U.S. And so that's kind of what we were committed to. A lot of the problems pop up in aftercare. There's a lot going on there. And so that was kind of where Run Against Traffic started. As I used to run on tour, I'm not a good runner, but I would do it because it just gave me something to do while we were on the road. I put my feet down in different cities and just run, give myself 20, 30 minutes before load in. And I feel like, connected. And so I was on a run after we had lost this first girl. And it had been months since I thought about her. When she was really sick in the hospital, I knew that she was close to the end. And she said, I know that I have a family and I know that I was loved. And I said, we know your name, and you've done more in 15 or 16 years to free people than some people will their whole life. It's almost like cliche or whatever when I think about it, but it's what she said to me was, Tommy, you have to keep sharing. There's many more like me. And so I didn't know what to do with that. It was deeply traumatic. Chrissy Green, it gets like all the credit here because my wife is a gangster. And like, I would have given up on this story because it was so outlandish and so crazy to me. I was like, this is a lie. They're going to hit us up for money, or they're making fun of us. Like, there's no way that this is real. And Chrissy was like, I cannot give up on this. Even if they make fun of us, it's not even true. If it's real and we walk away, I won't be able to live with myself. And so without Chrissy, there's nothing. I'm out of the story. And so when we lost this girl, it had been months and months since I'd even thought about her. It was so much. And I went for a jog. And on the jog, I thought about a friend of mine who had skateboarded across Nebraska to raise money for a skate park. And I thought, I don't skateboard. And I thought, well, I'll run. I'll do something stupid. Like, I'll run across my state. And then Chrissy can tell this. It was like waves. If I think about it, I haven't said this for a while. It was like waves. It was like, I'm going to run across the state of Utah. I'm going to talk about her in schools. We're going to write it down in a book. It's going to become a bestseller. We're going to rescue a lot of people. And I start crying. I get home and I'm like, Chris, I'm going to run across the state and you tell the story. And so that was kind of the initial thought. And so I ran physically from the top of Utah to the bottom. And the goal was to try to do a marathon a day every day for 2 weeks. And I kind of got broken up pretty good physically. And so it took me 17 days. And that was the start of Run Against Traffic. And ultimately, it was just, how do we create a huge running community of normal people that walk or run or cycle so you can be a part of fighting it wherever you are. You don't have to be special to do it. And that way I could look at anyone in the eye and go, hey, man, I did this crazy run. Could you do a walk around the block each day? Could you do your first 5K? Could you do your first marathon? Like, help us, like, jump in here and be a part of the solution. And so that was kind of the initial thought of Run Against Traffic as like a charity, and now it's going to become a foundation, and that way we can begin to like a mass resource for aftercare. So yeah, crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, God always has us doing crazy stuff, doesn't he?
I think so.
I think so too. I think that is amazing. And I am going to put links on our Solid Rock Radio website so that people can come to your page. It's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, it's an honor to meet you too, Cindy. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.
Goodbye.
Good night.
Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more great music and check out my blog page on the Solid Rock Radio website for my guests' social media links. If you've missed any of my past interviews, you can find them uploaded to podcast.solidrockradio.org. Have a wonderful week and let's be kind to one another.